Yes, bring it on.
Life Below Zero scored 14 Emmy nominations and 7 wins for presenting the extraordinary stories of people living in the Alaskan wilderness in mostly freezing temperatures. Kate Bassich featured in the hit reality television series from when it began airing on the National Geographic channel in 2013 until 2015. Her divorce from Andy Bassich prompted her exit from the show, and revelations about her marriage have been much talked about. Alaska might be an idyllic place with the beauty and bounty it has to offer, but living there is still fraught with challenges and entails being in survival mode most of the time. The temperatures plummet to 50 to 40 below. Winters are long, and summers are spent in preparation for its return. Not many dare to choose that lifestyle. Some might see the appeal in it upon watching the TV series Life Below Zero, as it documented the day-to-day activities of people such as Kate Bassich and her then-husband Andy Bassich, as they lived at Calico Bluff along the Yukon River near Eagle, Alaska, about 120 miles or 200 kilometers south of the Arctic Circle. For Andy, it was his dream to be self-sufficient and live in the woods, as he loves the isolation and the silence. He was born in Washington, D.C., but grew up in Wheaton, Maryland, matriculating from the John F. Kennedy High School in 1976, and then working as a carpenter. He moved to Alaska in 1980, and first saw the place he now called home in 1984. While mushing down the Yukon, Andy worked for 9 years to buy the property, and then spent the next 10 years clearing the land and building his cabin and other structures. By the time the show started airing, he'd been living there for 30 years, while Kate had been there with him for 10 years. The two first met in Dawson City in 2003, while she was playing tourist and he was captain of a riverboat called Yukon Queen. It didn't take long for her to fall in love with him and with Alaska after setting foot in it. Kate described her life as perfect and felt like the luckiest woman in the world each day, and she said, "It's a life everybody should live. Everybody should have this kind of peace." She had been living her ultimate dream of being with the one she loved in a little log cabin in the middle of nowhere. Kate and Andy were of the same mind that if quality of life was measured by how much free time one had in doing whatever one wanted, then this meant that they were enjoying an extremely high quality of life. They weren't hiding from anything by living there, but just following what their hearts were telling them was the best way to live. Kate was fully cognizant of the dangers of living remotely. Back in May 2009, she experienced one of the worst calamities that can happen in Alaska, when their home was submerged in flood waters and the town of Eagle was almost completely wiped out. They had an unusually wet winter, followed by warm weather that turned into a heat wave, which caused the mountain snow to melt quickly. They were already expecting the river to overflow and the runoff to be more than usual, but nothing like what actually happened. As the water from the river rose quickly and merged with the Ford Lake behind their property, they suddenly found themselves almost waist deep in water. They scrambled to get their 24 dogs into their John boat and canoes that they tied together to one of the shed posts and porch beam. It didn't help that the water was very cold, and the sun was about to set. The danger wasn't over, even as the surge subsided and daylight came, because the water then started rushing towards the river and threatened to capsize their boats. They lost a dog called Skipper when their John boat flipped, but fortunately the couple and the rest of their dogs were rescued as the ice water started to come in again. Andy became the leader of the recovery effort in the community, as he talked with officials and contractors about building cabins for the homeless. Despite what happened, they couldn't imagine leaving their home and finding someplace else to live. Since then, they've made preparations for each year's river ice breakup to protect their home and their sled dogs. The TV series painted a picture of what her life was like in Alaska. A typical day for Kate would start with a hot cup of tea as she sat beside Andy on the bed, while gazing at the amazing view from their window. Sometimes that was spent in silence, but most of the time they were survival planning and prioritizing what to do no matter the season. They would have a hearty breakfast as they needed it to stay warm and do their chores. When the Yukon River freezes, Kate and Andy are landlocked in until it becomes safe to get across the ice and put trails in. Their home is 14 miles from the nearest civilization, and the ice blocks their path towards it. During wintertime, the flow of water underneath the ice on the Yukon River is so powerful that it freezes and refreezes irregularly, resulting in a jumbled or rough surface, making it difficult and dangerous for them and their dogs to travel across. While Kate stayed home, Andy had to cut through the ice to make it passable and check for weak spots as well, because if one goes through, one could easily be swept away by the current underneath the ice. Once it was safe, Andy or Kate could go to Eagle to get their mail and do whatever else they needed. Some of the supplies they got from Fairbanks and couldn't bring home were stored in a school bus he converted into a storage unit in town. Andy had 24 dogs and a puppy, and they ran dog sled tours or short expeditions, teaching people to mush their own teams. They spend $4,000 to $6,000 on dry dog food a year, also feeding them fish they caught. While others use snowmobiles, he preferred the Alaskan bush way of using dogs to get around. He sometimes used a snowmobile for quick trips, but then found it more trouble than it was worth whenever it broke down, as he had to walk far to get his dogs to finish the job. They are the couple's most efficient and reliable workforce. They also served as the best alarm system when bears or other predators came to their property. Kate saw all puppies born and had strong ties with them as she fed, took care of, and played with them. She had a hard time seeing them transition from puppies to being sled dogs. Andy trained dogs as he didn't want to start from scratch when his dogs got too old and he had to retire them. Their property has a solar panel, but they used wood to heat their home and other structures. They used a fish wheel, a device that operates like a watermill, to catch fish in the river. The two worked together in preparing the fish for human consumption, involving cutting, scoring, brining, and smoking, with each one weighing as much as 7 pounds, about 3 kilograms. As they caught as many as 100 fish or more, they had their work cut out for them. They harvested vegetables in their greenhouses, which Kate would dehydrate and freeze. Andy ran a trapline for marten, lynx, and other wild animals. One of their sources of income was offering custom wilderness adventure vacations, in which one could stay at one of their log cabins and learn survival skills, winter camping, and salmon fishing. Kate relied on Andy and trusted him completely to look after her. She knew the basic stuff, but it was Andy who took care of most things when he was around. She worried whenever he had to leave, although they did have a radio to communicate, so they could let each other know if something went wrong. The most time he had been away from home was 10 days, whenever he had to attend a meeting for the Yukon fisheries. Kate would be then left alone to manage the place. All would be well, except when the weather turned bad, or when predators came looking for easy prey. She said that the best part was when Andy came home and he was super sweet to her. Andy tended to work alone, but there were times when he needed Kate's help and just gave her instructions. He was all praise for her, as he said she's good at dropping whatever she was doing whenever he asked her to. Whatever she lacked in ability and knowledge, she more than made up for with the willingness to do things and try her best. And that's all that mattered in his book. Kate and Andy announced their split in 2015, and the divorce was finalized the following year. Some were surprised by this, as the two seemed to be a perfect partnership, but there were those who thought that it was inevitable. She alleged that she was physically and verbally abused by him, stayed hoping things would change for the better, but it got worse over the years, so that she wanted out the relationship. In season 1 alone, viewers could see that something wasn't right with their relationship, as Andy yelled at Kate whenever things didn't go the way he wanted them to. He would explain that he wasn't pissed off at her, but just frustrated. One could only guess what happened when there was no camera filming them. Kate said that Andy can be sweet sometimes, and would even surprise her on her birthday, such as giving her a necklace that he'd made out of argillite and set on silver, with finger bones of a lynx. They would also go on vacation at some cabin, just to have a different ambiance, even if they only stayed there for a day. However, she admitted that their life together wasn't some fairy tale, as they did have issues from time to time. She said that it was easy to get on each other's nerves, as they were together 24/7. Unfortunately, Andy lost his patience often, and would curse or yell, although not necessarily at her. There were those who felt that his attitude towards her was justified, as she seemed to have a slow reaction time, or to have difficulty doing what he asked of her. For those wondering why she's like that, she later posed the question, "Have you ever been so deeply afraid of a person's reaction that you forget what you know how to do, out of paralyzing fear of making a mistake?" She later posted on her Facebook page that she's fighting post-traumatic stress disorder, and it was hard as there were unwanted memories and triggers. Kate left the show after they separated, but Andy's still part of it, much to the dismay of some fans who believed he should be fired by the network after what he did to her. He continued to live his dream in Alaska. In 2018, he sustained an injury that became infected and received treatment in Florida. After 6 months, he returned home and brought his new girlfriend named Denise with him. She was a trauma nurse at the medical facility he was in, although they first met a couple of years before that while she was with a Boy Scout troop on a canoe trip. He was still using crutches, and Denise was being a big help to him. When Kate left Alaska, the producers of the series called her up and asked if she was open to doing an interview, and she agreed, as long as she could tell the truth. She found it funny that they couldn't say yes to that, but had no problems airing the ugly truth while she was still part of the show, despite her pleas not to air those that would hurt her and her family. After everything that happened, Kate described herself as a bit broken, but still standing. Her healing mantra has been, Freedom is being you without anyone's permission. She misses her dogs and was happy when she heard the last puppy she raised, called Jack, was adopted by friends. She moved to Newfoundland and Canada and has built a life for herself, spending some time traveling and reconnecting with friends and loved ones. Fans were kept abreast of what was happening in her life via her Facebook page. Kate officially became a senior citizen on the 24th of March 2021. She had phlebotomy, removal of blood, for hemochromatosis, a disorder in which there are elevated levels of iron in the blood that could cause damage to many parts of the body, including the heart, liver, and endocrine glands, and said she's recovering. She had a thyroid cancer scare that year as well. Kate received her COVID booster shot in January 2022 and has been vocal about the importance of following safety protocols and her disappointment with those people who choose to ignore it. She's often been attacked for this and has sometimes felt as if it's better to say nothing at all, but said that it hurt her as she grew up in a time when no one could speak without being persecuted in the way it is now, through her social media account. She also has strong opinions on politics in America and said she never looked down on anyone's political beliefs, as that's a personal choice. Kate has received death threats and hate mail as she despises Trump as a man. However, no amount of intimidation, insult, or threat can stop her from saying what she believes is right. Her Facebook page has become a way for people to get to know her better and communicate with her. Kate's a Christian and a liberal thinker. She loves mankind no matter the color, country, religion, or sexuality, and hates injustice to humanity.
Thank you for spending some time with us. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss another video. We also handpick these videos which we recommend you watch next. You can talk to us on all social medias or ask a question in the comments below. Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you back tomorrow.